The Watchers Beneath. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean floor, Dr. Sarah Mitchell pressed her palm against the ancient scanner. The biolock recognized her DNA signature immediately, and massive titanium doors slid open with barely a whisper. She walked through corridors that had been carved from solid rock 3,000 years ago, when humanity's ancestors had prepared for the unthinkable. The Sentinel Command Center stretched out before her like a cathedral dedicated to human ingenuity. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing star maps, energy readings, and surveillance feeds from across the solar system. Here, 50 meters below the ocean floor, the last guardians of Earth maintained their eternal watch. Sarah had been born in these depths, just like her mother and grandmother before her. The Mitchell family had served as Sentinel commanders for over 8 centuries, passing down not just leadership but the sacred knowledge of humanity's true history. She knew every story, every name, every detail of the day the Zephyrians had come. The invasion had been swift and merciless. The blue-skinned aliens arrived in ships that blotted out the sun, declaring that Earth's violent species had no place in their peaceful galaxy. They offered humanity a choice that was no choice at all: leave voluntarily, or be wiped from existence. Faced with extinction, Earth's leaders had chosen exile. But not everyone had left. While the great evacuation ships carried billions of humans to distant stars, a small group had volunteered to stay behind. They called themselves the Sentinels, and their mission was simple: keep Earth ready for humanity's return. The Zephyrians believed they had won a complete victory, never suspecting that thousands of humans had retreated to hidden bunkers across the planet. Sarah walked to the Central Command Station, where Lieutenant Commander Alex Chen was as monitoring long-range sensors. His excitement was visible even in the blue glow of the holographic displays. "Commander, you need to see this. We're getting signals from the outer system. Deep space monitoring stations are picking up massive gravitational distortions." Sarah's heart began to race. For 3 millennia, the Sentinels had maintained hope that their exiled people would someday return. They had built their entire civilization around this belief, preparing Earth for a homecoming that might never come. Every Sentinel child learned the stories of the great ships that had carried their ancestors to the stars. Every adult dedicated their life to keeping those ancestors' legacy alive. The holographic display shifted, showing a 3-dimensional map of the solar system. Red dots appeared at the edge of Pluto's orbit, hundreds of them, each one representing something far too large to be an asteroid. Sarah studied the readings with trained eyes, comparing them to theoretical models the Sentinels had developed over centuries of speculation. "Alex, run a spectral analysis on the lead objects. I want to know what we're dealing with." The young officer's fingers danced across his control interface. Sarah watched the data stream across multiple displays, her breath catching as the computer translated energy signatures into recognizable patterns. The readings were impossible, yet undeniable. "Commander," Alex whispered, his voice filled with awe, "these aren't just ships. They're moving cities. Each one is larger than anything in our historical records, and there are thousands of them." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 3,000 years pressing down on her shoulders. The Sentinels had always believed their people would return, but they had imagined a small fleet of survivors limping home to a conquered world. Instead, the reading suggested an Armada T. Hat could challenge the greatest powers in the galaxy. She opened a communication channel to Sentinel stations hidden across Earth and throughout the solar system. "All stations, this is Command Alpha. Execute Protocol Omega. After 3,000 years, our people are coming home." The response was immediate. From the ice caves of Antarctica to the volcanic chambers beneath Yellowstone, Sentinel bases began powering up systems that had waited centuries for this moment. The Martian colonies, hidden in caverns deep beneath the red planet's surface, started activating ship construction facilities. The asteroid belt stations prepared to reveal defensive positions that the Zephyrians had never detected. But Earth itself was the greatest weapon in humanity's hidden arsenal. The Sentinels had not spent 3 millennia merely hiding. They had been building, preparing, transforming their homeworld into something unprecedented in galactic history. Every major geological system on Earth had been carefully modified and integrated into a planetary defense network. Sarah walked to a secondary control station and placed both hands on the master activation panel. "All stations report ready status," came the unified response from a dozen different voices across the solar system. "Initiate Earth Defense Protocol," Sarah commanded. Beneath the world's oceans, massive generators that had been dormant for decades began spinning up to operational power. The planet's magnetic field shifted subtly as ancient machines deep in Earth's core started their calculated dance. To any observer in space, it would appear to be natural variation in the magnetosphere. They had no idea that humans had spent 30 centuries turning their homeworld into the largest weapon ever conceived. The tectonic monitoring stations reported successful activation of the continental shield arrays. Seismic activity along major fault lines was being channeled into charging stems for weapons that could crack moons. The aurora borealis flickered and danced as atmospheric processors came online, preparing to transform Earth's upper atmosphere into an impenetrable defensive barrier. Sarah's personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from deep space. The signal was encrypted, using codes so ancient that only the Sentinels still remembered them. She authorized the decryption and watched as words appeared on her screen that she had dreamed of seeing her entire life. "Terran Exile Fleet to Earth Sentinels. Request permission to come home. Fleet composition: 4,700 capital ships, 12 million support vessels, population approximately 8 billion souls. Admiral Jackson Rivers commanding." 8 billion. Sarah's legs nearly gave out from the shock. When humanity had been forced into exile, the total population had been barely 4 billion. Not only had their people survived the journey to distant stars, they had thrived beyond all imagination. She composed her reply with hands that trembled slightly. "Earth Sentinels to Exile Fleet. Welcome home. Defensive positions prepared. Zephyrian occupation forces number approximately 50 million across 12 major installations. Earth stands ready to be liberated." The response came back within minutes. "Understood, Earth Sentinels. Beginning approach to inner system. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Time to show the galaxy what humans do to those who steal our home." Sarah smiled, remembering her grandmother's stories about the day of exile. The old woman had described the tears, the desperate promises, the vows that humanity would return someday to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. That someday had finally arrived. She opened a channel to all Sentinel positions. "Attention all stations. Our people return not as refugees, but as conquerors." The Zephyrians believed that exile would break the human spirit. They were wrong. They created something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Across the solar system, weapons systems that had been tested and refined for 3,000 years began their final preparations. The asteroid belt revealed hidden fortresses that could destroy entire fleets. Mars opened construction bays containing warships built using technologies the Zephyrians had never dreamed of. And Earth itself began to sing with barely contained energy as planetary defense systems prepared to demonstrate why humans should never be underestimated. The Zephyrians had made one fatal mistake when they forced humanity into exile. They had assumed that survival would be enough for the scattered human fleets, that the refugees would be grateful simply to exist somewhere in the cold darkness between stars. Instead, exile had forged humanity into something harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever encountered. Sarah looked up at the ceiling of the command center, imagining the blue sky far above where Zephyrian families lived in cities built over human graves. They had raised their children on humanity's homeworld, convinced that they had rightfully inherited a paradise. Their leaders made laws in buildings that stood where human governments had once ruled the world. For 3,000 years they had lived in peace, believing that the primitive humans were nothing more than an unpleasant memory from their ancestors' time. They had no idea that every day of that peace had been purchased with humanity's growing hunger for vengeance, or that the exile they considered a mercy had become the forge in which the galaxy's most dangerous species had been reborn. The countdown began. In 72 hours, the Zephyrians would learn the true cost of stealing humanity's birthright. Part 2. The Storm Returns. Admiral Jackson Rivers stood in the command center of the UHS Retribution, the flagship of humanity's exile fleet. Thus, E-ship stretched for 20 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull gleaming with armor that could deflect stellar radiation and weapons that could crack planets. Around him, the bridge hummed with activity as his officers prepared for humanity's greatest homecoming. Jackson's ancestors had been among the original exiles, forced from Earth when he was nothing more than genetic potential in humanity's distant future. He had been born in the deep void between stars, raised on stories of the blue-green world that his people had lost. Every human in the exile fleet carried those same stories, passed down through 150 generations of wandering. But they had done more than simply survive their journey through the darkness. The holographic display before Jackson showed the full extent of humanity's return. 4,700 capital ships, each one larger than anything in Earth's historical databases. 12 million support vessels carrying everything from construction equipment to entire ecosystems. Transport ships housing 8 billion humans who had never seen their ancestral home but dreamed of it every night. They were no longer the frightened refugees who had fled the Zephyrian ultimatum. 3,000 years in the void had transformed humanity into something the galaxy had never seen before. Jackson's tactical officer, Commander Elena Vasquez, approached with the latest intelligence reports. Admiral, our advanced scouts have confirmed the Sentinel transmissions. Earth's hidden defense network is more extensive than our most optimistic projections suggested. They've turned the entire planet into a weapon. What's the status of the Zephyrian occupation forces? Jackson asked. 50 million aliens across 12 major installations, Elena reported. They've built cities where our ancestors' capitals once stood. Their leadership complex sits directly over the ruins of old New York. Intelligence suggests they view Earth as a trophy world, a place where their elite come for vacations and hunting expeditions. Jackson's jaw tightened. The Zephyrians had not simply conquered humanity's homeworld, they had turned it into a playground, building their civilization directly on top of human graves. Every alien child playing in parks built over human burial grounds was a reminder of what had been stolen from his people. The bridge's main communication array chimed with an incoming transmission. Admiral, we're receiving a message from Earth Sentinel Command. They're requesting permission to begin synchronized attack preparations. Jackson authorized the transmission, watching as a hologram flickered to life showing a woman who could only be described as quintessentially human. Dr. Sarah Mitchell wore the bearing of someone who had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. Behind her, Jackson could see displays showing the hidden might of Earth's defense network. Admiral Rivers, Sarah said, on behalf of Earth Sentinels, I want to say welcome home. We've been waiting a long time for this day. Jackson found his voice thick with emotion. Dr. Mitchell, on behalf of 8 billion exiled humans, thank you for keeping the faith. We're ready to take our world back. The hologram shifted to show tactical displays. Our intelligence indicates the Zephyrians have become complacent over the centuries. They believe humanity was completely eliminated or scattered beyond any hope of return. Their defensive positions are oriented toward external threats, not planetary uprising. Earth's hidden systems can neutralize their orbital platforms, but will need your fleet to handle their capital ships. Jackson studied the battle plans that Sarah transmitted. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its scope. Earth's hidden weapons would eliminate the Zephyrian orbital infrastructure in the opening moments of the battle. The returning human fleet would then systematically destroy any alien vessels that attempted to escape or call for reinforcements. Within hours, 3,000 years of occupation would be ended. Dr. Mitchell, are you prepared to activate Earth's defense systems on my command? Admiral, we've been ready for 3,000 years. Jackson turned to his fleet commanders, each one representing different aspects of humanity's transformation during exile. Admiral Chen commanded the construction fleets that could build orbital habitats in weeks. Admiral Okonkwo led the science vessels that had unlocked technologies beyond Zephyrian understanding. Admiral Petrov controlled the war fleets that had been designed for exactly this kind of liberation campaign. All commands, prepare for final approach to Earth. Execute Liberation Protocol Alpha. Across the vast expanse of the human armada, ships that had traveled between stars for millennia began their final acceleration toward home. The exile fleet had been built not just for transportation, but for this exact moment. Every vessel was equipped with weapon systems developed through 3,000 years of careful research and preparation. Jackson opened a fleet-wide communication channel. Warriors of humanity, today we complete a journey that began 3,000 years ago. Our ancestors were forced from their homes by aliens who believed that mercy was simply choosing exile over extinction. They were wrong about mercy, and they were wrong about humanity. The response from 8 billion voices was immediate and thunderous. Humans who had been born in the void between stars, raised on stories of the blue-green world they had never seen, finally had their chance to reclaim their birthright. The Zephyrians thought that forcing us into exile would break the human spirit. Instead, it forged us into something far more dangerous than anything they could have imagined. We return not as refugees begging for scraps, but as conquerors reclaiming what was always ours. As the human fleet entered the inner solar system, Earth's sentinels began the activation sequence for weapons that had waited centuries for their moment of purpose. The planet's magnetic field shifted as generators buried in the core spun up to full power. Tectonic monitors reported ready status as continental-scale weapon systems prepared for their first and final test. Jackson watched the tactical displays as Zephyrian sensors finally detected the approaching human armada. Panic spread through the alien command networks as they tried to understand what they were seeing. Their databases contained no records of ships this advanced or fleets this large. For 3,000 years, they had believed humanity was extinct or scattered beyond any hope of return. "Admiral," Elena reported, "Zephyrian forces are attempting to activate their planetary defenses. Earth's sentinels are jamming their communications and beginning neutralization of orbital platforms." Through the bridge's main view screen, Jackson watched as Earth came into view for the first time in his life. The blue-green marble hung in space like a jewel, more beautiful than any story or simulation had prepared him for. This was humanity's birthright, their ancestral home, the world that 8 billion exiles had dreamed of seeing, and it was about to be liberated. All fleets, commence attack. Today, we show too. The galaxy, what happens when you try to destroy humanity. Today, we come home. The battle for Earth began with light itself as the planet's hidden defense network came online. Orbital platforms that had controlled human skies for 3 millennia simply vanished, destroyed by weapons that had been waiting 30 centuries for this moment. Zephyrian capital ships found themselves facing not just humanity's returning armada, but Earth itself, transformed into the galaxy's most dangerous weapon. The war for humanity's homeworld lasted exactly 6 hours and 37 minutes. When it ended, not a single Zephyrian vessel remained operational in the solar system. The occupation that had lasted 3,000 years was over, ended by the very species they thought they had eliminated. Jackson's boots touched Earth's surface for the first time as the sun set over what had once been New York City. Around him, 8 billion humans began the process of reclaiming their ancestral home. The exile was over. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again.